Welcome. I'm Terry, one of the consumer technology specialists here at Mid-Continent Public Library. One of the questions that we are asked from time to time is how to create a pivot table in Excel. Pivot tables are a great way to summarize large amounts of data in a spreadsheet. Even better, if you need to rearrange that information, a pivot table can move the data around very easily. Better still, pivot tables will do some of the math for you without your writing a single formula. First, let's look at our example spreadsheet. The example that we're using today is a list of our video collection. It lists the name of the movie, its genre, who starred in it, and the year the movie was made. While you might decide to sort or filter this table, you may also decide to create a pivot table to summarize the information in this list. With that in mind, let's learn how to create a pivot table in 6 easy steps. Step 1 is to make sure there are unique column headings. As you can see in our spreadsheet, it's really so small that we definitely have unique headings as we look at row 1. But sometimes large spreadsheets will, for example, list 2 different sets of address information, perhaps one for an owner or manager, and then another set of that same kind of information for the business itself. And lots of times people forget to make those column headings unique, so you have duplicate field names like name, address, zip code, phone number. Be sure that you make your column headings unique and understandable by adding perhaps a prefix or a suffix to at least one set of the field names. For example, you might decide to add something as simple as a C in front of the company's field names or an O after the owner's field names. To help Excel not be confused about what should be included in your pivot table, be sure to include step 2, which is to make sure that you have a blank column and a blank row that frame your data. In this case, in column E, you can see that we have blank cells in that column, which is to the right of our existing information. And if we go down to the end of our spreadsheet, we can see that row 60 also has blank cells. Step 3 is to complete the spreadsheet as much as you possibly can. If you see that you have blank cells and you can put in information for those cells, be sure to do so. Otherwise, your pivot table will not be as accurate as it could be. Step 4 is to insert the pivot table. But before we get too involved with this step, here's something that you really need to remember, and that is you need to click on a cell that is within your spreadsheet data. It's very easy to have accidentally clicked outside of that spreadsheet, so I'm just going to click on a random cell in the spreadsheet, and that will become very helpful in just a few more clicks. Once we've clicked on that cell in our spreadsheet, we're going to go to the upper left of the ribbon, and just to the right of home, we'll click the Insert tab, and then we'll see the Pivot Table button and click it. This brings up the Create Pivot Table window that has several sections to it, and we want to consider the options that are available within this window. So first we are asked to choose the data that we want to analyze, and it's already suggesting here that since we're in an Excel workbook, we probably want to use the data from that workbook. And it's even selected not only my cells, but even says, here is the worksheet name, And then for the cells, it says, okay, do you want to start at A1 and go through D59? Well, that's absolutely correct. But we do have another option, and that is to use external data source. So we could use an access table, a SQL database as potential external data sources instead. In the middle of this window, we have another option which says we need to choose where we want the pivot table report to be placed. We could decide to keep our pivot table when we create it on the worksheet where we are right now. So we could say, yes, existing worksheet, and we want it to start on, let's see, over at the right of the window is G1. So maybe we want to start it there. But because we want to really focus in on that pivot table, let's go with a new worksheet and click OK. Just that quickly, here we are with a brand new worksheet, and we are ready to start adding fields to our pivot table. Before we actually add fields and create a pivot table, let's take a second to look around at this new kind of worksheet and see how it is laid out. On the left, starting at cell A3, we have the equivalent of, well, kind of a chalk outline here where our pivot table will start to appear. Just in case you haven't used a pivot table in a while, you even get a reminder that to build a pivot report, you want to choose fields from the pivot table field list. Well, that field list is over at the far right in the pivot table fields pane. Just below the name of that pane and to the far right, we have a gear button. When you click the drop down, it shows you that you can reconfigure this pane and move the boxes that are in it around to suit how you work and what makes sense to you. Today, however, we're just going to take the default, so I'll click off of that. Below our gear button, we have a large box that shows, as we look closely here, the column headings that have come straight from our spreadsheet. This is also called the field list. So this is how we are going to really create our pivot table. Below that, we have 4 boxes that are how we are going to arrange those fields in the pivot table. So starting at the lower left, we have a rows box. So just like a spreadsheet, our pivot table will have rows going horizontally across. And this says, okay, so what are the row headings? If we go diagonally and up to the right, you can see that we have a columns box. So rows, columns, just like a spreadsheet. It's just that we're rearranging those columns maybe as well. Below columns, we have a values box. So if you picture that spreadsheet, you have row headings, you have column headings, but then you have all of those cells that contain data. And that's the idea here with this values box as well. It's just that, again, we're rearranging what is in the spreadsheet to make our pivot table. And then if I go diagonally and up to the left, we find that we have a filters box. So even though a pivot table can really summarize the information that's in your spreadsheet, you may occasionally need to uh, filter and hone in on specific information even more. And the filters allow you to really show just very specific pieces even of that pivot table. Let's create our very first pivot table. And to do that, we're going to go up to the field list box, and we're going to simply select one of those field names. To get us started, I think I'd like to select genre, and I'm going to see what that checkbox to the left of genre will do. So I'm going to click on it. And then let's go down to our rows, columns, values boxes. And oh, okay, so here's the rule. When you check a checkbox that's to the left of a field name, it will put that field name in the rows box. If I check more than one of the check boxes in the field list box, well, then it will put those fields into the rows box in the order that you've clicked. One of the things that kind of keeps people from trying out pivot tables is that they say, well, I don't know what should go in a row or what should go into a column. And here is the very best news I think I can give you, which is it doesn't matter. Obviously, pivot tables sort of default to putting things in the rows box first, but you don't have to do that. What you do is simply try, and if you don't like what happens, you simply move that field name to another box and fix your pivot table so it works the way you want it. Well, now that we have genre in this rows box, let's see what actually happened. So let's go to our worksheet. And here in column A, we don't even see the word genre, but what we do see is the values, the names that were in that column in our spreadsheet. And they're in alphabetical order. Wow, this is pretty interesting. Well, let's see what else we could do. So, you know what? I think I would like to know how many action and animation uh, videos I have. And the way I can do that is to go back over to our pivot table fields pane and grab genre again. Now, this time I'm going to click on the word genre, and as I drag my mouse down, there's a little kind of bubble that says genre that's attached itself to my mouse pointer. And I'm going to drag down and drop it off at the values box. And what it says is I now have a count of the different genres. Wow, this is great because here I'm getting a formula already written for me and I haven't had to write a thing. Well, the count of genre, this is something that's important to remember. Genre is a text field essentially where I just have words in it. So Excel looks at that and says, oh, well, with text values, I'm going to try to count how many are in each field. If I decide to drag in a field name to the values box and it has numeric information, Excel sees those numbers and will try to add the numbers to themselves and try to come up with some sort of a total instead. Well, let's look at what count of genre does to our pivot table. And we've added in a new column, column B, which is now count of genre, and it tells us, wow, we have 14 animation and 10 drama, and we have a total down here in row 13 that it's also added in, that we have 58 videos total in our collection. Well, wow, I've done math without writing formulas. I've alphabetized things without sorting. Well, what else can this pivot table do? And this is where it just gets really exciting. So, what could we do next? What if we try to figure out year made and how that could be displayed? Let's add year made to the columns box because I'm kind of curious how that columns box works. Well, to do that, I'm going to rest my mouse on where it says year made in the field list, and then I'm going to drag the little bubble that attaches itself to my mouse pointer down to the columns box and let up, and then look at this pivot table and how it has changed. We still have the grand total in row 14, but now it's split out and I can see how it's done by looking at row 4 where it shows each one of the years where one of the movies in my collection was made. And I even get a count per year. So for example, in 1983, it shows that I have 2 dramas, and in 1991, it shows that I have one action, one comedy, one drama, and then it gives me a total of that particular year. Going over to the right, in column AE, I still have grand totals of the different genres. And in AE14, it shows me that I still have 58 videos in my collection. Well, let's say that I want to get even more detailed. Well, what I could do is add in, say, the movie titles for each one of the genres. So let's go back to the pivot table fields pane, find movie title in that field list, and I think it belongs as a row. So let's check that box. And now as we go down in that pane, we can see movie title below genre in the rows box. And wow, this is sort of amazing. Now below action, for example, I have a listing of each one of the movies that's in the action genre, and it even shows me which year that particular movie was made. Now, looking at this, I kind of get the idea that maybe this pivot table is just going to grow and grow as I add more details, and maybe that's going to be a little difficult to print. So I think I'm going to remove that movie title field. To do that, I have two options. First of all, I could just go up to the field list box, find movie title, and then click on that checkbox to remove the check. Or I could come down to the field name within the rows box or the columns box, wherever it is, click on that name, and then simply drag up toward the field list box so that it disappears from the rows box. Now we're ready for step 6, and we want to pivot our existing table. To do that, we simply rearrange the field names within the rows and columns boxes. So for our first example here, let's go to year made in the columns box, click it and drag its little bubble down below genre in the rows box, and look over at the left. And here we have a totally different kind of table look. So we have the genre, in this case action, and then below that we have the years that the different action videos were created that are in my collection. Well, I kind of like this look. It is kind of vertical maybe though. So let's see what else we can do. Let's go back over to the right to the rows box, find year made again, and let's drag it above genre and then go over to the left to look. Well, this is totally different because, of course, now we have the year and then the type of genre, the type of video that I have in my collection that matches that year. So I have animation in 1941, for example. Well, this might be exactly what I need. And then again, maybe it's not quite what I'm looking for. So let's go back over to the rows box. Let's grab genre this time and drag it up to columns. Oh, well, this is a pretty nice looking table. It looks a little more square for me. It's not quite so horizontal or vertical, so this might print really well. In column A, we have each year where I have a video that was made, right? Going along column A. And then along row 4, I have a listing of the different genres that are now the column headings. And of course, the numbers that make up the most of that pivot table are simply the count of the genres by year. We do have in column K, these are subtotals of the different counts as we go down until we get to K34, where we have a grand total. And yes, we have 58 videos within our collection. Now, this is sort of the tip of the iceberg. We've only used 2 field names, and yet we have 4 in our spreadsheet. We could arrange and rearrange all 4 of those fields to come up with other pivot tables until we get exactly what we are looking for. And here's the best part of this whole pivot table creation experience. It only takes 6 easy steps. For more information about Excel and especially pivot tables, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online-learning And then check out some of our online resources such as Universal Class, lynda.com, Who Knew It, or Learning Express Library. Be sure to tune in next week, June 10th, when Paige will present Accessing Free Books.